Hey, Brad.
Yeah.
I got Windows 2004 last night.
You're in the future? You're living in 2004 now?
I haven't installed it yet, but I have a full command line interface.
It's like the late night man used to say, in the year 2004.
So I have no idea what that is, actually.
Wait, what?
No, I've never heard that one before.
That's the Andy Richter, the Conan, that's the previous iteration of Conan O'Brien, or was that 2 iterations ago? The
one on NBC?
The first iteration of Conan O'Brien, which was, I believe, Late Night?
Late Night with Conan O'Brien.
Late Night with Conan O'Brien, his first real late night show. That was, you don't remember that?
You
don't remember the in the year 2000 bit?
Brad, I'm going to go ahead and tell you something bad.
In the year 2000. I'm super hoarse right now because I'm slightly hungover.
No, that was 20 years ago, man.
More than that, actually. 22, 23, 24 years ago, 25. That was when I was in high school, so that was like 20, maybe 25 years ago.
That might have been the time period I wasn't watching, because when you were in high school, I would have been in college, and I was doing other things.
Yeah. What is it about college that makes you not watch TV?
I didn't have a TV for a while.
Okay, that was me too, actually.
Yeah, and then I got a TV, and it was mostly used to play NHL 96, it turns out.
Okay, yeah. It's a good collegiate activity.
Yeah, well, it's the one time, at that time in your life, in my life at least, being able to play multiplayer games was a brand new thing. Like, having constant access to multiplayer games was new.
Having constant access to people around to play them was also...
Yeah.
You didn't have to drive to somebody's house. They were just around.
Yeah, you could just be like, hey, man, I got the 4-tap. You want to play some NHL? And you'd be like, yeah, I'll play some NHL.
Yeah. That's what living in the future is.
So I got to say, the first thing that Windows 2004 did is I have this task scheduler thing set up to run a Python script that makes my audio controller work with my interface right. And the first thing Windows 2004 did was break that.
Nice.
So
great.
Yeah.
Yep, that's the dark secret of living the streamlined automation life in Windows, is that it's just a giant house of cards. And
so task scheduler seems like it maybe doesn't like Python scripts now or something. I think I can just load the WSL stuff and set up a cron tab and maybe never think about this again.
You spend hours and hours setting up task scheduler and group policy and shortcuts of all varieties.
Yeah,
and along comes a Windows update and just goes, and it all collapses.
I have not spent as much time engaging with Task Scheduler as you have.
Sucks. It's terrible.
It's bad. I was going to say that's the secret of it is it sucks ass.
It doesn't work.
No,
it doesn't work reliably. It doesn't schedule tasks, which is in the name.
No, it schedules them.
It does, but not reliably. It's not always clear what user is running them. So sometimes the thing you want to do, you don't actually have privileges to do.
Well, and also sometimes the one job that Task Scheduler has is to look at some conditions, and when those conditions are fulfilled, to do a thing. Sometimes it looks at the conditions are fulfilled,
and it just doesn't
do anything.
Yeah, totally. Well, that's what I'm getting at. Sometimes, and it doesn't tell you why. That's the thing. It might have tried to do the thing and was told by the system, you don't have the rights to do this, but it never tells you that.
But I can't I need to find the command line interface for Task Scheduler so I can run a task to see what's happening at the console.
It has that. We can talk later, or I can just tell you right now what it is. Actually, hold up.
Yeah, tell me right now.
I've got a whole bunch of them set up right now. Do you want to know what this is going to turn into the whole episode if we keep going like this?
Do I want to know what love is? Yes. Show me. Give me a moment.
Do you want me to tell you what command line stuff I have set up that I can just type a word in to make happen? Rather than navigating.
This feels strangely kinky, but okay.
For example, because most of the stuff in Windows, you have to navigate 5 layers of menus, right, to find the button you want to click.
Yeah.
So I have automated things like switching between the light and dark theme in Windows. So
why would you ever switch between the light and dark theme in Windows?
I like the light theme during the day and the dark theme at night.
Doesn't it do that automatically now?
No, it does not.
What?
We've talked about this, man. So
I thought it did that automatically now.
I have shortcuts called light and dark. And I can I can pop up the start menu and type light, and it will automatically switch to the light theme. I have one called desk swap that will swap which one is my primary desktop.
Wow.
I've got a variety of them that mute and unmute various input devices, sound input devices.
Oh yeah, that's a Nearsoft jam right there, right?
Yes. No, I use Task Scheduler for that, but hold up, let me tell you. I was just going to tell you. schtasks.exe is the command line version of Task Scheduler. So you can run schtasks/run and the name of the task. That's for automating. This
is a fantastic, incredibly useful cold open.
That's for your automating purposes. We'll talk more later.
Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will.
I'm Brad. How you doing, Will?
I'm over here making a tech pod. How about you, man?
That's right, man. It's just here we are on a Saturday morning, feeling lively and crisp, ready to talk.
Everything's great.
Yeah, nothing bad at all. Whatever. I'm sorry. Things are fine.
I'm just look.
They're not fine, but they're fine.
Yeah, everything's fine. I slept on the couch last night, not because of any infractions.
Okay,
I didn't do anything wrong.
Okay, but you just couldn't be bothered to get up.
No, my daughter has been in our room the last couple of nights, and we are a queen size bed house, so it's 3 people in a bed is too many people.
That's a lot.
So discretion was the better part of valor last night, and I chose to just couch sleep.
She's enough of an actual little person now that she occupies a full half of the bed, not so much like a 2 people plus a tiny human. Like this kind of.
If she just occupies half of the bed, she's doing better than she ever has. She's a full sprawl sleeper. It's like arms, legs in all starfish positions.
Punching way above her weight class on the bed occupancy. Yes.
Her mass to volume ratio is off the charts.
Oh boy.
So we're a little, we're great. We're doing great.
Fine. That's fine.
What are we going to talk about today? Well, first off,
yes,
I want to point out we're still reading Hitchhiker's Guide.
Yes. We are.
Brad, you got to get on this. It's coming out.
I know. I need to get. So I read both intros. I read both like the foreword and the introduction.
The Neil Gaiman one and the Douglas Adams one.
Written by Neil Gaiman, which largely restated what was written in the introduction by Douglas Adams, but that's okay.
Yes.
I will say this. I found the Douglas Adams authored introduction wildly more charming. Nothing against Neil Gaiman, but like there's just a certain lilt to the way that Douglas Adams, like his phrasing. If that's what I'm in for, I'm excited. That's what I'm trying to say.
We'll get to this when we talk about the book. But the thing that has struck me rereading this is how much of modern discourse is shaped by the weird quirks, especially in our friend circle, by the weird quirks that of the Douglas Adams' use of language.
Okay, great. I'm excited about that. Like, there's just something about like that. There's a certain idiosyncrasy of like speech patterns that I really go for. It's like in the intro, it stuck with me. That's how memorable it is. That like when he's talking about being drunk in a field in Austria. When he had the idea for the book
outside Innsbruck.
Yes, like the way he described his drunkenness was, if I remember the phrasing, we are speaking of the mild inability to stand up.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, you got the point across. That was a very tidy and economical and slightly charming way to get that idea across.
So it's been fun rereading those. This was our challenge for hitting 1,000 patrons. We're at almost 1,100 now.
Wow.
So a lot of people signed up this month. A lot of people are stoked about Hitchhiker's Guide.
Everybody wants to read Hitchhiker's Guide. Thank you. That's flattering. The last thing I'll say about it real quick is it doesn't look that long. Maybe it's the omnibus edition that I've got, but like I thought somebody had said it was like your kind of standard 300-page novel, but like in the omnibus it's like 180 pages or something.
It's like depending on how fast you read, I think my Kindle told me it was going to be 5 hours.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. At the outside.
Yeah. Not a problem. I got plenty of time. And
it's a good Sunday afternoon.
Yes. I'm getting ready to get into it. And I am looking forward to it. I know at least one person I've seen on the Discord said they just finished reading it for the first time and were just in love with it. So
it is one of the things that I want to talk about is it is striking to me how prescient it is for a thing that is written in the late 70s about the modern technology of today.
I don't know if that's a good thing or not.
Pros and cons.
Okay.
Anyway,
yeah.
Today we didn't mean to make this Nvidia month, but Nvidia,
like
announced.
We went into this podcast with this topic in mind, and it occurred to me like we probably need to say like this is not sponsored by Nvidia.
Yeah. No,
we're doing this show purely because this is a very newsworthy topic.
Well, I mean, the new GPUs came out and they were
also
worthy
very
of
newsworthy.
Discussing.
Yes. It's just like Nvidia has no chill at the moment. They just keep dominating the news.
Well, yeah, and we had the game streaming thing last week, which was not entirely an Nvidia thing, but the thing that I like best, and I think is maybe not the easiest to use, but the best results is the Nvidia solution with Moonlight.
Can I ask real fast, not to derail this? How is Moonlight? I don't know if we covered this. How is Moonlight on the physical Steam Link, the actual box that Valve sold? Like, is it adequate?
So that's where I run it. It seems like the hardware because
that hardware cannot do H.265 is the reason that I ask. So
that's it.
So I wonder if H.264 is up to the task.
It's fine for 1080p.
Okay.
I have not tried. You can't do 4K on the Steam Link.
Yeah.
Okay. The setup is a little fiddly. Like there's not an auto updater for Moonlight. And I'm not sure if that's because Moonlight is still early or if it's that there's some limitation of the Steam Link that won't let applications update themselves.
Okay. But just performance latency wise, it's fine.
It's great. Okay. I played a fair amount of Death Stranding or Watch Dogs 2 last night. Using it.
I might actually get that Steam Link out of the box and put Moonlight on it. See how it is.
If you haven't, so I use one Steam Link that is Wi-Fi, one that is Ethernet. They both work fine.
Okay.
The Wi-Fi one is a little bit, occasionally you get graphics artifacts. The wired one, I never see that.
Are there kind of your commercial video streaming entertainment apps available for the Steam Link? Probably not.
Not really.
Okay.
So you can't get Netflix for it.
Right. Okay. That's what I meant. Okay. So it could not be like a good Apple TV replacement necessarily.
I think you're better off with a dedicated piece of hardware for that is not the Steam Link. So the flip side of that is I think probably I just got iOS 14 or tvOS 14 on my Apple TV yesterday. So I haven't tried the new support for controllers, but theoretically they fixed controller support with this release of iOS or tvOS.
Wait, was it broken before?
Well, so it supported all the sticks and buttons except for the sticks on the Apple TV and the iOS devices were the MFI standard. So they would map to that, which meant there was no clicky sticks, which is fine if you're playing games built for iOS. But if you're trying to play stuff that's built for the PC that expects to have clicky sticks, you had like situations where there were weird chords where you had to like press the Xbox button on your Xbox controller. And it was not great.
No.
But today we're talking about why this ARM Nvidia deal, and it's an interesting. The reason we're talking about it is because it's one of the biggest semiconductor deals of all time.
Yeah, for sure. Nvidia has acquired ARM for $40 billion in cash and stock.
Yes,
from
Nvidia is the biggest semiconductor company right now. They're the biggest chip designer.
Yeah,
and it's important because the two parts of Nvidia, we all know Nvidia because they make video cards and they made the switch CPU, GPU, SoC, all of this other stuff.
Mostly games kind of applications is where they have been known for ever. Right.
But the games are kind of the secondary part of Nvidia's business these days, because it seems like they're trying to be the hardware that runs the machine learning infrastructure of our future, of future compute.
Like I kind of had an inkling of this before, but like this deal has made it very obvious that Nvidia is kind of leading this whole other life. I feel like they kind of have a double life now, right? Of like everybody knows them for their gaming applications, but like they're getting into data centers and machine learning and potentially some other stuff off of this deal that has nothing to do with games.
Well, they've been in that for like there's a very good reason that they released Ampere first as a data center product,
right?
Or as a compute, a machine learning compute product, not a gaming product.
Yeah.
So ARM, if you don't know what ARM is a chip designer design company out of the UK that basically spun out of Apple and Acorn, I think.
Did
Apple
really?
and Acorn started it.
I didn't know that.
Hold on. I want to make sure I got that right.
I had no idea. ARM Holdings or ARM Limited now is the...
So Acorn Computers developed the Acorn RISC machine architecture in the 80s. Huh. And then Apple put money into them.
That's where ARM comes from.
Yeah. But now ARM stands for Advanced RISC Machine rather than Acorn RISC Machine, which is what we originally did. Anyway,
I see.
The point is they design CPUs and then license that technology out to everybody. And they, unlike Intel, which say designs a CPU and then makes that CPU and then sells it to you.
And that's the only way you can get it.
Yeah, that's it. ARM says, hey, here's all the bits that go into our CPUs, these systems on a chip, SoCs.
Oh.
You can get whatever you want. You can take the pieces you want. You can, like, if you want this, here's a package. Here's the overall box, and then you can kind of Chinese menu it out, where you say, I want one of this math coprocessor and 6 of these linear math accelerators, and you can take the bits that they give you and assemble them however you want, like Lego.
And like if you're Apple, for example, you can be like, you can keep your GPU. We have your own. We have our own now,
right?
And we're gonna put our own GPU on the die with your ARM stuff.
Exactly. So you're licensing an instruction set and a chip design, is my understanding with ARM.
Yes. I started writing the notes. Like, I don't know that either of us are equipped to get into this, or if we even need to. The whole kind of like CISC versus RISC dichotomy.
We can talk about it a little bit.
But I've been interested in what it means for 25 years, but I've never 100% gotten my head around it.
Yeah.
Or should we even like talk about what an instruction set is for people that don't know? Like it's essentially the very base level operations that a CPU is carrying out inside itself, right?
Pretty much. And so at one level, there's like the things you need to be Turing complete in a computer, which is like, ands and ors and nors.
You're talking Alan Turing, not the Turing GPU.
Yeah, I'm talking about Alan Turing, who the Turing GPU is named after.
Yes, just to be clear.
So at like the low level, all of the math that happens in computers is like 4 or 5 different kinds of mathematical operations.
Right.
But when you go up a level, then you start to build specific functions on the chip that are hardware accelerated that make certain types of math faster. So like the difference between integer math and floating point math is a good example of that. Right. If you think back to the old, 386, 387 days, Intel said, okay, these are mostly integer processors. And if you need floating point math, then you can buy this extra 387 chip that sockets in.
A math coprocessor that you can stick on your board.
Yeah.
And then eventually that logic started being included just inside the CPUs because it made sense.
Well, because it turns out there were a buttload of applications for floating point math, massive amounts of floating point math, like games. So
I don't know if this is illustrative or not for people who aren't computer scientists, which I certainly am not. But for example, you can go on Wikipedia and just pull up a list of every instruction in the x86 instruction set, for example. And you can scroll down and it's literally just like there's an operation called add, which adds. There's like add with carry. There is convert byte to word, compare operands, convert word to double word, decrement by 1, signed multiply. You know what I mean? Like those are just, and to clarify for my own benefit as well as anybody listening, like those are fixed functions that are implemented in the hardware of the chip, right?
When you are talking about somebody writing machine code, they are writing code that calls these specific instructions, right?
Right.
So whereas if you write a C program, you write a program that has some basic human readable logic that isn't just a series of math instructions that then becomes translated into that by a compiler.
Right. So so everything from, at the end of the day, like everything from the highest level, like Python or JavaScript or whatever, down to C, to any compiled language, like at the end of the day, all that's actually happening on the CPU is these instructions being executed. It's
interpreted down into this stuff.
It's just that the compiler is what handles turning the human code into machine operations. And so
in the 90s or late 80s, I guess, the CPU architectures had gotten large and the instruction sets were increasingly complicated.
Complex, you might say.
Well, that's a retronym, The complex was a response to reduced instruction set computing.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So these guys, I think the MIPS people came up with this first, but it seems like it was maybe developed in parallel at multiple places.
What, like the concept of RISC?
Yeah.
I think I read this morning it started in Berkeley. I think it started in academia.
Well, anyway, but the point is, rather than have a large, complicated set of instructions that did a bunch of accelerated things, they were like, why don't we just make all the processes run faster and keep them simpler? And I think specifically a fixed length. So where complicated instructions could use multiple cycles per compute, these are the same size instructions that run at the same speed, so you can do things more predictably.
Okay.
We're getting into computer science stuff that doesn't matter here.
Yeah. And it's pretty far out of our depth. So you're saying like the instruction has to like execute and complete within the same cycle, kind of
within
situation.
A specified number of cycles.
I see.
The other thing that is important to know about all this stuff, because this was like in the 90s when Mac and PC people were crazier and would yell at each other about which computer was better.
Yes.
You'd hear all this RISC versus CISC stuff.
Yes.
Back then, there was an appreciable difference.
A lot of Power PC, like people would wear Power PC T-shirts and stuff like that back then.
People wore all sorts of bad T-shirts, and like I had one of those color shifting T-shirts. We don't need to talk about sartorial choices. The point is, in the modern context, there isn't really a CISC versus RISC anymore.
Okay.
There are RISC CPUs, RISC instruction sets with complex elements, and there are complex instruction sets with RISC-like elements.
Okay.
They're all. Everything's mishmashed together now.
Yes, multiple people who absolutely know what they're talking about have told me basically that like, yeah, even a modern x86 CPU has RISC-like elements inside it.
Well, I mean, the point, the big thing, we should do an episode about this because it's really interesting. But the Pentium 4 was a turning point for all of this stuff, because the Pentium 4, they were like, we can make these really crazy, complex, super deep pipelines, and we can predict what's going to happen fast enough that we can run it at like 5-6 gigahertz. It's going to be so fucking fast. It's going to blow your ears off. It's going to be the most amazing thing ever. And then it didn't work. And that was the moment that like the CISC wave broke, and they were like, well, maybe we should simplify this whole thing and make it just, parallel, real parallel. So anyway,
I mean, back to the actual topic at hand, moving back to the ARM stuff. My understanding of why ARM is so big in the mobile space is that primarily it's because it's so power efficient. The performance per watt is very good. Is that a direct result of the way that the RISC stuff processes instructions?
I don't know if it's a direct result of the way the RISC stuff processes instructions, or a direct result of the design goals of the RISC of the ARM processors over the years.
I see. Okay.
Like you can make a really power hungry RISC chip, just like you can make a really efficient CISC chip.
Sure.
There are some 0.3 watt TDP x86 processors.
Okay.
But
you're just not getting a lot of performance out of them necessarily.
Well, not even that. It's people don't use them for the types of things that you use ARM processors for, because the market has gone in the ARM direction.
Right. That's what I mean. Like that's why there aren't phones with x86 mobile chips in them.
I mean, there are. You just don't. Nobody knows what they are. Yeah.
What?
Yeah, you can buy x86 Android phones, or you could for a while. I don't know if you still can.
That's bizarre.
So SoftBank bought ARM a few years ago. SoftBank is an investment holding company from Japan who invested in such companies as WeWork, Theranos, and Uber.
Oh, no.
It's
a questionable portfolio.
They've done some stuff that worked out for them, but like they've not had great times the last few years, it seems like. And they sold their stake in ARM for $40 billion in stock and cash to Nvidia, or they want to. They've announced that they want to.
Yes.
This is a huge deal. It is interesting because they didn't talk about it with investors or regulators before they announced that they want to do this. And there's a pretty heavy regulatory burden here, because the UK, the US, China, and maybe even Japan are going to care about this.
Okay.
And
the EU,
everybody,
right?
No, because it's UK. So probably not the EU by the time the deal has to pass regulatory burdens.
Maybe not.
But yeah, like it's going to be a while before this is active. This is an announcement of intent, not an announcement of success.
Yeah.
It's interesting, and it's important because there are literally billions of ARM chips shipped every year made by Apple, Qualcomm, Samsung, Nvidia, and a bunch of other smaller companies that you probably don't know about.
Yeah, should we just rattle off kind of the most of the typical devices you would find ARM chips in? It's like every iPhone on the market, just about every Android phone on the market.
Almost every Android phone, yeah.
Just damn near every tablet on the market of any kind. The Switch.
No, because like Surfaces and stuff like that are all x86. Like anything.
Yeah, but that's I feel like they're sort of stretching the definition of tablet there. Like that's moving. Fair. That's almost moving into computer, laptop-y kind of space.
Well, I mean, it is a laptop. It's just a laptop without a keyboard attached.
Yeah, like the Surfaces are weird hybrid devices that are.
Yeah.
But you're like the iPad, all the Amazon Fire stuff,
Oculus Quest.
Yes. The Switch, the Nintendo Switch is ARM based.
Mm-hmm. Some routers. Which is shocking.
Yes. Oh, the Raspberry Pi, like practically all of the entire
Mister.
The Mister has an ARM core on it in addition to the FPGA. Pretty much the entire single board computer scene, like the Raspberry Pi and all that stuff, is ARM based.
I haven't torn one apart to see or looked at a teardown, but my guess is like stuff like Alexas and Google Homes and all of those like Nest screen things, your video doorbells, a lot of your your like internet connected webcams.
Yeah.
Any kind of Internet of Home smart device probably has an ARM chip in it.
Yeah.
Internet of Things smart device.
Like suffice to say, if it's not an Intel or AMD made x86 based device, like the odds are it's ARM.
Well, no, there's also MIPS.
Well, yes.
So
like my router. Well, I didn't want to get into that. That's kind of an edge case. Yeah. Like my router has a MIPS chip in it, but so
a lot of networking stuff has MIPS chips because they're cheaper.
In fact, we'll get to that. That is a topic to talk about later. But ARM is extraordinarily widespread. Is the point?
Also, do you know what else has ARM?
What's that?
The world's fastest supercomputer.
Oh. Really?
Yeah. So supercomputers and data centers have buttloads of ARM chips now.
Okay. So that is a relatively recent development, right?
The last 5-10 years, probably. Yeah. And the reason that happens is because in a data center, in a supercomputer context, two different use cases. Data centers care a lot about performance per watt and performance per, both in terms of heat generated and power consumed.
Yeah, I feel like you hear a lot about the cooling needs of a data center, right? Like to the extent that sometimes helps dictate where they're built. Stuff
there's
like
a reason that data centers get built on the Columbia River in Oregon, and it's because there's a lot of hydroelectric power and a lot of cool water.
Yeah.
So you see, basically that's where we're at is like, there are some places where you want a big giant x86 or x64 CPU with hundreds of cores and the whole thing. Yeah. But also there are places that you're going to want something that's lower power and a little bit less capable maybe, but also does exactly what you need it to in the place.
Do you ever want to just hang out in a data center?
They're really loud.
Well, I'm sure you'd probably want some noise canceling. I bet noise canceling headphones would work extremely well in that white noise kind of environment. But like, because that's the ideal. That's the ideal use case for noise canceling headphones. But are you as big a fan of air conditioning as I am?
I mean, right now, yes, I am 100% a fan of air conditioning. I would love to have air conditioning. It seems like it'd be really nice.
How cool do you think it is in your average data center? Don't you want to just go in there and like lie down on the floor for a while?
So I've never been in a data center. I've been in a supercomputer before, and it was not a comfortable environment for humans.
Is it too cold?
It was very cold.
Really? Are we talking like convenience store walk-in freezer type cold or what? Surely not that cold.
It was not 40 degrees. It was probably 65.
Okay. Oh, that sounds pretty chilly. Good. That sounds pretty good.
Look, I was in Texas and it was great for the first minute or two. And then you're like, oh man, it's kind of cold in here. Okay. It's, when you're walking through the grocery store in the summertime and you get into the freezer aisle or the butter aisle where the refrigerators are all open, wasting a ton of energy every day.
Yeah.
It's like that one where you're like, oh man, I wish I wasn't wearing shorts right now, but this feels okay.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
If anybody can get us into a data center, let me know.
The supercomputer angle is interesting too, because in supercomputers, they use ARM processors to reduce latency and like kind of traffic cop a lot of the interactions between the other processors in the setup. And different supercomputers have different requirements. Like I spoke to somebody who works on supercomputers that do fluid dynamics calculations, where like they're trying to figure out how wind interacts with skyscrapers to affect weather patterns in big cities. And in order to do that, like every particle that simulates a bit of wind has to be able to talk to every other particle because they all interact. And you end up with these massively complex situations where latency really matters. And if one part of the simulation gets out of sync with the others, then the whole thing has to be scrapped and started over. So like they build these clusters so that there's a negligible latency from one side to the other, and you need a bunch of CPUs like evenly distributed through the network to do that.
To manage that. I mean, am I right in assuming that maybe the ARM cores in that scenario are not handling the heavy math of the simulation, or they're just doing the, like you said, the traffic copying, the bookkeeping to keep everything in sync and that sort of thing?
Probably some of both, but I don't know. I'm not an expert. That is a level of granularity that I do not have on this.
Yeah, topic. I'm just sort of like throwing that question out into the ether, but I would wonder if they're using like some kind of ASIC or something like GPU-esque almost to handle the heavy compute aspect of that task.
So, but my understanding is that they're set up in a way that that you have processors that are tuned for specific things. So like you'll have x86 cores for doing lots of big floating point math.
Right. That's what I was getting at.
Like that is pipelinable and deep. And then you'll do GPU cores for massively parallel stuff where you need thousands upon thousands upon thousands of cores, not hundreds of cores. And then, I think the ARM processors are going to be the kind of
the glue.
Making sure everybody gets fed.
Yes.
Basically.
Yes.
All the different cores are getting the data they need in the right time. So like, why does Nvidia want ARM?
Why does Nvidia want ARM? Well,
they like having data market share.
Yes.
And, if you look at Nvidia is right now a video game graphics company, sure. They very much want to be the machine learning AI hardware provider. And you can tell that by looking at how they're pushing Ampere to workstations and data centers.
Yeah. You
can look at the fact that they're putting 10,000 shader cores on these GPUs with like dedicated machine learning units, and ARM also, you can get dedicated machine learning acceleration on ARM chips now.
Yeah. And like we should mention, like, a lot of Nvidia's own messaging around this deal pertains to AI specifically. Like the line I pulled out here is that ARM is based in Cambridge, and they said that they want to turn the Cambridge location into, quote, a new global center of excellence in AI research.
Yes. Well, and it, like, if you think about Nvidia's path over the last 20 years, because this is like a 23-year-old company now, that they looked at the PC graphics market and were like, look, we can start building these. A, there's a market for PC graphics, but B, this market provides a path to massively parallel machine learning accelerators, ray tracing accelerators, all of that stuff. And they used the market demand for games and 3D graphics to pay for the R&D to get to the point that they had machine learning processors.
Can we just generally use the terms AI and machine learning interchangeably in this context? Because they use AI in most of their messaging.
I think AI is the more consumer-friendly term,
right.
Probably.
But just to be clear, they mean basically the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, we could just call it, statistical linear math, but
Sure.
It's, people are going to be less interested in that.
Yeah.
But machine learning and AI essentially.
I'm just trying to clarify.
I would say machine learning is probably a subset of AI if we wanted to be highly technical, but I don't think it matters.
Okay.
So Nvidia has sold ARM chips in the past. The Tegra is in the Switch. It was in the Nvidia Shield and the Shield Pro. I think they're high end.
Yeah, it still is. I mean, yeah, I looked at the Tegra roadmap before this, and like they've got a new one on the way. Whatever. There are rumors about a new Switch next year, so like there would be a new
coincidence,
a new one in that, for example.
But like they haven't made big inroads into the phone market. There were a couple of phones that shipped on Tegra a few years ago.
Was that Razer phone on Nvidia?
I feel like maybe
the gamer phone.
it seemed like their performance per watt was not which in turn meant you had bad battery life on the phone. Wasn't where you wanted it. But it's been pretty good on like the Switch. while the initial launch Switch didn't have the best battery life, it's more than sufficient for like what I've been using over the last 4 years or 5 years, however long it's been.
So one thought I had about this acquisition, like obviously there's data centers and supercomputer stuff. There's machine learning research. Like there's a lot of applications for this, but like you tell me if this is an accurate perception of the mobile market. Like Apple's ARM-based chips are like insane, right?
God tier. Yeah.
Like they went out and hired like some of the best chip designers in the world, right? Of course,
and spent billions of dollars
because they have unthinkable amounts of money. But my understanding of the Android market is like the Qualcomms and like the ARM chips in that space just don't keep up, right? With that,
I don't think it's that they spec up. Like if you look at
bad necessarily, it's just that.
Well, it's a different situation because like Apple knows what their software team is doing, and they have the software. They tune their software roadmap to the hardware roadmap, so they can like really get everything out of every bit of silicon that they put in that chip.
Right.
If say, if you're LG and you're buying a Qualcomm processor, you probably aren't going to spend the $1 billion a year that you need to turn that off the shelf processor into the custom processor like Apple does.
Totally. But the point I'm getting at is like, to use the most recent example, when the iPhone SE came out, like all the reviews were just like, it is insane the performance advantage that this budget Apple phone has over the current flagship Android phones. So what I'm getting at is like, I wonder if Nvidia maybe sees an opportunity to become like the dominant SoC supplier in the Android space off of this.
So my guess is that they're probably going to pull out of the Android SoC space as part of the regulatory burden for this deal to
Interesting.
happen.
Yes, actually, that's totally a good point. That's like antitrust stuff notwithstanding. Could they possibly be looking to do that?
I think Nvidia is more interested in the data center and making sure that things like TensorFlow cores end up in other people's phones.
Okay. Because this exact idea was floated as well in some of the Android press that I looked at, or some of the Android media market, like people speculating that like, there's kind of nothing stopping Nvidia from holding the best of like, they can keep licensing.
I think the regulatory stuff in China and the UK would probably be the thing that stops that.
The idea to expand on it is just that they could keep licensing the ARM designs that they currently make to the same customers, but that they could like have a slightly more competitive version.
They'll keep the good one for themselves.
Right. Or something along those lines.
I would be shocked if that is allowed to happen. Like in the US, I wouldn't be surprised if it's allowed to happen.
I was going to say,
like EU and the UK, that's not going to fly.
Maybe this is just expressing my complete lack of faith in any kind of antitrust action to ever take place again. Unless it's politically motivated.
I think, here's the thing. Given that NVIDIA has essentially no market share in that space right now, my guess is that they sacrifice the potential future there for licensing out instruction set. Because here's the thing, is if they do something too anti-competitive, there are other similar but not not directly compatible instruction set CPUs out there, including some open stuff.
Yes, that stuff is probably, it's not even ARM related necessarily, but that's probably the actual most fascinating aspect of this topic, but we'll get to that.
Yeah. So I think my guess is that NVIDIA will protect the Switch and Shield business for set-top boxes. And because honestly, like if you're thinking about NVIDIA, if NVIDIA's Tegra problem is that they perform really well, but their performance per watt and battery life are bad, tablets make a ton of sense, like the Switch, like the Shield tablet. Set-top boxes make a ton of sense where your performance per watt is less important. As long as you can passively cool it, nobody cares. So I think we'll see them sacrifice the ability to be in phones, because it's not like they're not. Here's the question you need to ask is it better for NVIDIA to make a little bit of money on every single one of the 1 or 2 billion phones that are sold every year, or to make a lot of money on some small percentage of the market because they piss everybody off and they all switch to MIPS or whatever?
Sure. Yes, that is an actual exact question I have when we get to the MIPS and RISC-V stuff, but I'll save that for now.
I think it's, like I said, I think it's much more likely that we'll see it go the other way, where NVIDIA makes Tensor cores and things like that, like specific parts of the current GPU architecture, things like their H.264 and H.265 live encoders, which are really good, make them available to ARM licensees.
Okay, so what you're saying,
along with the other IP,
what you're saying is it's less likely that Nvidia is going to take the ARM tech and kind of pull it behind their curtain, and more likely that some of the Nvidia tech is going to bleed back into the publicly available ARM stuff.
I would really, really hope that the one of the 3 or 4 regulatory agencies involved would ensure that doesn't happen.
Right. So like an example is like ARM has a GPU design that they can license along with the CPU stuff.
Yeah,
but
Mali,
like you're saying that like Nvidia graphics could end up replacing that Mali GPU design. For example.
Or even some subset, like small bits and pieces. The other thing is like their Power VR has a whole ARM GPU like they sell a buttload of ARM GPUs too. Like there have been 3 companies making ARM GPUs for a while, 4 if you count Apple, even though they don't sell those to external vendors. Like there's the beautiful thing about ARM is if LG wants, or if Qualcomm wants Nvidia's GPU, they can do that. If they want their own GPU, they can do that. If they want PowerPC, they can do that. And you can assemble the chips however you want. It's up to you. It's like Lego, but way more complicated and expensive to build. So yeah, I think that's it. I think, and so the outside edge case for this is that I think we're going to see Nvidia dropping ARM CPUs in weird places in the future. Like we saw a little bit of this with the Ampere stuff and the direct storage API to accelerate storage, which in reality isn't going to start happening for like 2 or 3 years because it takes the APIs a while to roll out. I think we'll see in the next 5 or 10 years, we'll see Nvidia dropping ARM CPUs on GPUs.
Interesting.
To reduce the simply because there's often math that you need to do in games that is latency dependent. Like this is one of the benefits consoles have.
Sure. Is
that because the consoles use shared CPU memory pools where the CPU and GPU are both talking to the same memory all the time. It's really inexpensive for the GPU to pass something off to the CPU and then come back to the GPU again.
Also, the CPU and the GPU are on the same die, so there is no there's a system bus to communicate over.
Right.
Between the two.
Whereas on the PC, the GPU has to talk across the PCI Express bus, which like on a GPU that's running at 3,000, thousands of megahertz, you're looking at sometimes 5 or 10 or 20 clock cycles on the GPU before a communication can happen across the PCI Express bus. Anyway,
my one question about that idea of including like ARM designs on a graphics card, for example, is like, I mean, would you agree that Nvidia probably employs a lot of the best integrated circuit designers in the world at this point?
It would be hard for me to say that, but okay, sure. The results are good.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
The proof is in the pudding there, it seems. But like, do you think like a general purpose like ARM setup on a graphics card would make more sense than like, let me back up. They seem really good at designing logic on their cards built for purpose, right? Or designed for purpose. Like this direct storage stuff. Like you assume that there is hardware on those GPUs that is very good at decompressing that data. Like,
agreed.
Would it make sense to have a more general purpose unit on there as opposed to just designing whatever you need?
Look, it's not outside the realm of possibility that we're going to be plugging NVMe drives onto your video card in 5 years.
Okay, so at that point, a very small, low power ARM core that handled that I/O would make sense or something like that. I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like
that's kind of what I was getting at with a couple weeks ago when we did the 3080 stuff. When I mentioned that the graphics card is rapidly becoming like the central feature of a PC.
Hey guys, plug your mouse into your video card for the best performance.
Right. Like have your video card handle your storage IO now. Like at some point the graphics card is the computer.
Well, I mean, that's what Jensen's been trying to make happen for 20 years.
Right. That's what I mean. Like it feels like we're moving toward that where like what does this, I mean, obviously you need a CPU, but like it's increasingly marginalized, it seems like.
It was literally a talking point, I think around the GeForce, probably the 5800 launch, 5900 launch, maybe when they started doing compute on like general purpose compute on GPUs. He's like, yeah, this is going to be the most important processor in your computer from now on.
Right.
And turns out probably sounded hyperbolic then, but it was probably correct.
Like I'm trying to conceptualize in my head the weird fuzzy shifting line between the graphics card and, like, say, the motherboard. For expansion purposes, it would never make sense to turn a graphics card into a motherboard and literally have the GPU on the board and just plug a CPU into it. But, like, it feels like we're kind of like that distinction is becoming less meaningful. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, when you look at those big compute clusters where they have, like, a huge board with a shitload of PCI slots and lanes, and then you just drop 8 boards into it with one CPU, like the amount of power that goes to doing the GPU math versus the CPU math is strongly in favor of the GPU side.
Right.
It's a weird, like, computers are going to be real weird in about 10 years.
Yeah,
that's
totally.
That's the TLDR.
Totally. That's kind of what I'm getting at. Like, at some point, if the graphics card is handling 90% of your system functionality anyway, why not just make that the whole system?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm interested. There are people in our audience I know who are further down this rabbit hole of what computers look like in 10 years than we are.
Yes,
I'm really curious to hear their reaction to this conversation.
Yeah. I literally copied and pasted a conversation out of the Discord a few days ago about, like, where CPUs are going in the next 10 to 15 years that, like, frankly made my head explode. Like, some really wild stuff in there.
Well, I mean, and this isn't it's not idle speculation. Like, look at what a computer looked like in 2000. When I moved to California, I think I had a dual core Celeron machine. So 2 physical packages socketed into 2 sockets on the motherboard. And, like, the difference in that computer and the computer that is in my pocket now is astounding.
Orders of magnitude, right?
Yeah, it's because of ARM.
Yeah.
And, like, everything, the wireless internet connection is better than my wired internet connection was. My screen is way higher resolution. I can do more things at the same time than I could then. Like, it's bonkers. The whole thing's crazy.
Yes. Yeah. The acceleration of development of technology has been pretty dizzying for me.
It's a lot of, a lot of that is on ARM. Like, the rise of phones that move billions of units a year, like, left the opportunity to really push the technology because there was a lot of money at stake. And
But just, I mean, not to get off on some old man rant, but, like, if you started out with parallel ports and text mode only displays and that sort of thing, like, where we are now versus where we are then is, like, quite frankly hard to grapple with sometimes.
It has been a long road.
Yeah. But also a short one.
I mean, I remember taking, hours to download a 1 megabyte driver.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Brad, what do you think this means for phones?
300 baud.
Oh God, I never had a 300 baud. I started with a 14.4.
Yeah, so did I. I didn't either. I know it existed. I'm sorry. What were you asking?
Look, I couldn't hear you. My audio coupler came off the phone, so we got to resync this modem call.
Jam that thing back in there. You got to rerun your init string.
What does this mean for phones?
For phones?
For phones.
Oh, you mean ARM. Like right now?
Yeah, right now. Well, Nvidia's buying ARM. Shit, is my phone going to be bad now?
We covered my apparently abortive idea that they were going to try to dominate the Android space. So probably not a ton at the moment. Maybe the Android, like you said, the Android SoCs get better GPUs or something like that, or more machine learning acceleration, something like that. But, like, that's probably my guess. 5, maybe not 5, but, like, that's probably, like, minimum 3-4 years away from showing up and shipping products, right? With the regulatory overhead and the R&D to product cycle lead times and stuff like that.
I think they suggested this is going to take 18 months to get approval and maybe close.
Right.
So yeah, I think my assumption is there's not going to be too much work happening by other parties on anything that comes out of this until that deal is closed.
Here's like a really high level legal and business question. Is there anything to stop them from beginning R&D with this purchase in mind prior to the deal being fully approved? Like,
I have no idea.
Yeah, right. Like, I don't know any. I quite literally don't know anybody who would know the answer to that question. I mean, we need high level, like, IP lawyer types and regulatory, like, antitrust law types to answer a question like that, right?
the amount of anxiety I had when I had bought a house but hadn't closed on it yet and had gotten the keys and started knocking holes in the walls was very high. Okay, so I can't imagine.
That's literally that question, right? Like, is it okay for them to start knocking holes in the drywall before the?
I honestly don't know.
Before they've got the deed in their hands.
I mean, do they exchange IP? I guess. I mean, probably not because it's all proprietary and secret.
Yeah. You're probably right. You're probably right.
I mean, but I assume they're talking. I assume like they start. I assume anytime you have, like, I know in media spaces, because I've worked with some people who went through a giant merger recently, like they were talking to everybody was talking to everybody, but nothing was happening, but everybody knew what was coming. Yeah. So I'd say that's probably what happened. I don't know. I'm curious to hear what people think. Like, do you ever have Nvidia, send us an email or signal me.
Do you ever have this tendency when you see a deal of this magnitude? I mean, like you said, this is like basically practically the biggest deal that's ever been made. Do you ever have a tendency to look at that and try to ascribe some kind of like organization and method to the whole thing? Like think
what do you mean?
Like, oh, there must be a plan like fully written down and they know exactly what they're doing and they're going to execute it. But like then what you just described is the actual reality of it's actually just a bunch of human beings flailing around trying to figure it out for a period of months to years, right?
I mean, you don't spend $40 billion if you don't have a plan for what you want to do with the thing you're buying, right?
Right. But it's not all set in stone.
I mean, I think everything's fluid, and there's some parts of the ARM business that are getting spun off that Nvidia didn't want, stuff like that.
Yeah, there's much more of a human, like a in the moment kind of human element to the decision making, right? Than you might think.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm like I was a little $40 billion is a staggering amount of money. Given the scale of that ARM business, I was a little bit surprised that it was only $40 billion.
I could see that, sure.
Like when ARM sold a few years ago for 20 or 30 billion, whatever it was, I was kind of surprised that it was only like I assume that the licensing fees aren't onerous per chip.
Okay, well, that is a good segue into the next topic then, because I was wondering about that exact thing.
Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, these are very not public numbers. It's funny. It's even hard. I was trying to figure out how much of the global microprocessor business, like across all architectures and all markets, ARM represented, because it has to be a significant portion. But I like that stuff is even all buried in really expensive analyst reports about microprocessor like if I wanted to pay $5,000 or $6,000, I could have gotten a report that would let me know exactly how much microprocessor business ARM gets and what their licensing model looks like. But I didn't spend that $5,000, Brad. I'm sorry.
Sounds like we need a $5,000 tier on the Patreon next month to get this analyst report in our hands.
You give us the $5,000, we'll buy one analyst report a month.
That's right.
And we'll put it right back into the pod.
You could just send us the report if you have it. I won't tell anybody.
Yeah, look, the TechPod and content.down.
So yeah, like that. I guess that brings us to kind of the last big topic here, which you have written in these notes as: are there alternatives to ARM for phones?
Not really right now, but maybe soon.
But yeah, it seems like it's getting there.
Well, I mean, Intel has been trying to push an x86 part for phones for a really long time, and nobody's biting.
Good luck with that, as we said.
But I think MIPS and RISC-V have both shown
RISC-V.
Is it RISC-V?
Yeah, it's RISC-V.
Oh, I thought it was RISC-V.
It's the fifth. Yeah, I agree. That sounds better, but it is the fifth generation of RISC.
If it was, why is the hyphen in there if it's 5?
According to them, it's right there on the Wikipedia page, man.
I hate this.
I don't know what to tell you.
I regret. Look, I was pro. So RISC-V is
RISC-V pronounced RISC-V.
God,
that's literally how the Wikipedia page starts. That also came out of Berkeley, actually. So I looked into it while we were talking about it. We were both right earlier.
Oh, okay.
The concept of RISC started at Berkeley, but then MIPS was the company that spun off of that research. And was the first commercial entity to offer a RISC.
But like it seems like there was parallel development happening in other places at the same time, because like DEC had a MIPS chip and all, or a RISC chip and all that.
Is that like how calculus was created by more than one person simultaneously?
Leibniz and Newton,
yes.
Yeah.
But
Newton got the win though because he spoke English. It turns out.
Yeah.
But he had a better publicist, I think.
Yes. Yeah, that whole Apple thing is very easy to remember.
Yeah, also apocryphal.
Yes, I'm sure. But so there's a little bit of public myth making goes a long way in getting people to remember you. It turns out. So yeah, which one do we want to talk about?
So,
Well, it's kind of the same topic.
RISC-V is an open source
It's
architecture.
literally an open source instruction set, the way that open source software is free, freely available.
You can take that instruction set and add like a few $1 billion and hundreds of people and maybe thousands of people, and you can have a CPU in a few years.
Yeah, I guess that's the big difference here, is that like a single programmer can take an open source repository and do something cool with it, and the barrier is very low.
Depends on the repository, but yeah.
Well, you know what I mean, though. Like a single person can develop software pretty effectively, depending on what they're doing and how skilled they are. But like to take an open instruction set and actually turn it into a tangible product takes like unthinkable amounts of dollars, money and skill to design the chip. Like getting chips made is incredibly expensive and difficult. You know, like it's not like some little garage startup is not going to take this and change the world, right? Like it's.
I mean, they might.
Well, maybe
that's not out of the question.
I guess not.
It's not. This isn't. I still firmly, that's a really good question. Like, is this still a market that a garage startup or even like a $1 billion startup can compete in?
Maybe it's
probably
the thing that stuck out to me in reading about RISC-V is it's something about ARM actually that it had never occurred to me, which is that like RISC-V being open, you can take the literal base instruction set and do whatever you want with it.
Right.
I did not realize that an ARM license is not anywhere near that permissive. You're essentially like you can extend the ARM designs, but not that much in comparison. Does that make sense? Like it sounds like you're largely kind of taking the cores that ARM offers with some customizations that you can specify, but you cannot just take the ARM instruction set and license it and then make your own chip from the ground up with it.
No, you can do that. That's what Apple did specifically.
Oh,
so
okay.
But
this thing I was reading was wrong about that then.
Well, what you're saying is you can't license the instructions for ARM and then build your own chip. They'll like a lot of businesses, if the price is right, you can do the thing you're looking for, right?
Sure, but maybe that's like written into the licensing agreement and then it costs more or something like that, right? Like
right.
That's what I'm getting at is like you're not just going to pay ARM a flat rate, take those instructions and then go off to the races and do your own thing.
Yeah, if you license the Cortex A9, you're licensing the chunks that make up the Cortex A9, and then how you assemble them is up to you. That's
what I'm getting at. Whereas the difference is with something like a RISC-V or actually now MIPS, which we're getting to, you can take the literal instructions and like build your own CPU core from the ground up. Is my understanding.
And that is so. I'm going to be interested to see if open source projects can handle this. My guess is that probably they can't. Like it seems like too big a thing for the typical chaos of a big open source project.
Yeah, I could see that. Should we?
I also don't know.
Should we mention the MIPS stuff before we get too much?
The MIPS stuff. The MIPS stuff is interesting.
They have open sourced their architecture, which, like you said, has been around since the 80s, right? Like MIPS. My router has a MIPS 64 CPU, for example.
Yeah, so a lot of networking hardware is powered by MIPS processors.
So it's really interesting, especially interesting in the context of my router, the Edge Router 4, because like I SSH into it, it's just running Debian, but it is it had obviously by nature it has to be a MIPS 64 compiled version of Debian.
Yeah.
So like when I go on there and add like the apt repository to look around for like software to install on there, like there have to be MIPS 64 compiled versions of those binaries available to actually do anything with them. You know what I mean?
But like, it's an interesting, like if you look at ARM as embedded processors, which is what we would have called these like 10 years ago, MIPS is the original kind of embedded processor, right? But I think there was even a MIPS version of Windows NT up until 4.
Sounds right, because I think they were in workstations back then, right?
Yeah, they were early RISC chips, and people were excited about them, so they ended up in weird places.
So this article you linked basically makes it sound like MIPS has just lost dramatic amounts of market share to ARM over the years.
Well, the challenge is that as ARM has developed more performance per watt for higher end CPUs, for higher end SoCs for phones, they still have like a really deep well of designs that go back, and can scale down to less capable devices that don't need the same kind of hardware. But yeah, they still there are 10 billion chips shipped that use MIPS, I think is what they advertise.
Okay. Well,
so
that's that's not exactly nothing.
Like a small chip manufacturer still is selling billions and billions of chips.
Okay, that's fair. But the point is they have now opened their architecture.
Yeah.
Just like RISC-V, except they are a commercial company that has also made this open.
So yeah, like there are. So the takeaway on this, if the question we're answering is, are there alternatives for ARM for phones? The answer kind of not right now, but maybe in the future.
Well, they're available. It's just nobody has done the insane amount of legwork it would take to actually implement them in that role.
Yeah, and in the time scale, like if we're looking at 2 to 3 years to close this deal, is there a way? Like, could Apple switch from ARM to MIPS or ARM to RISC-V, whatever? RISC-V. Could they in the time like? I wonder if Apple would have committed to full ARM after this deal closed. I know that's been a thing that's been obviously in the works for 10 years on their side.
Yeah.
But Apple and Nvidia have a kind of inimical relationship that has not been great. And I'll be interested to see how they react to this.
Yes. So that was like when you mentioned like maybe the ARM licensing fees are not actually that high. Like that was the exact question I wanted to address with this was, would Apple switch? Is it worth it? Like, Apple being like one of the most cash-rich companies in the world, right? Is it and with the number of devices they sell, like are the licensing fees on ARM just low enough that it's not worth the investment for them to switch to a licensing-free kind of situation?
So there's multiple components. One is that ARM has been optimized relentlessly for the last 13 years in a way that these other architectures have not.
Yeah.
Like they're not as fully understood.
Right.
They don't know where the slow and the fast, where the bottlenecks are. We don't have institutional knowledge in how to design really fast, capable MIPS processors or RISC-V processors for phones and other tablets and set-top boxes.
Like I'm just throwing this out there, but this would probably be at least like a decade-long undertaking to implement.
Yeah, my guess is that Apple looked at the power performance curves on ARM in like 2007 when they started selling iPhones, and they were like, hey, if this continues at this rate, the Intel line and the ARM line are going to cross in about 2020, 2018. And at that point, we could start not doing Intel chips anymore if we wanted. And that's been the process this whole time. Yeah. That's been in the works this whole time. So yeah, you're looking at 10 years from now, from the starting line to when you start seeing viable competitors shipping. And like everything else, you'll start seeing like weird dev kits 2 or 3 years before the actual viable products get done. Like, if you think back to that first Chromebook Intel released, it was slow and useless. And then 2 years later, they're pretty nice and worth having.
Yeah.
So,
but some of the little bit I've been reading about these open architectures, like analysts in that space seem pretty bullish on their future, though.
I think anytime you get a monolithic company, like people will be investing in these as a hedge against Nvidia against Nvidia behaving badly.
We've got one gigantic company now controlling a frightening amount of this space.
Yeah.
These are alternatives that might become more relevant in the future.
Yeah. So I guess that's it.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic. It's like we're obviously neither hardware designers nor programmers. It's like
nor analysts,
pretty heady stuff here, and we're just kind of trying to make sense of it as best we can. But I think it's fascinating.
Look, man, it's a confusing world. We just want to figure out what's going on out there.
Yeah.
We've reached the portion of the show where we thank our patrons.
Yeah.
The currently 1,090 people who like what we do enough to give us money or want to get access to the Discord or want to hear the patron exclusive episode every month. Yes.
Or just want us to continue to keep doing this.
Yeah. You can find out how to support the Patreon at patreon.com/techpod. Next week is our email episode.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. That's good. That means I've got one more episode's worth of buffer before I have to finish that book.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you got 2 weeks, maybe 3, depending on whether we do.
Yeah. Good to know. It's good to know what kind of time frame you're working with.
Look, just Sunday afternoon, Brad.
Yeah. Just need to find a sunbeam and kind of relax in it.
But yeah, so I'll open up a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy channel in the Discord this week. So if patrons want to discuss it, then they will be able to. We've had a lot of, as always, lovely conversations. I learn something new every time I dip into the Discord. And like I learned about panorama stitching of taking how photography on Mars works the other day, which was amazing. One of just talking about how the panorama is stitched and how you do like self inspections of the wheels and the rover and all that stuff. It was awesome. Super cool.
We have someone there who works on it.
Yeah. So if you want to find out more about how to join the Patreon or back the show, it's $2 to get access to the Discord. And you can find out about that at patreon.com/techpod. As always, thank you to our executive producer level patrons, Andrew Cotton, David Allen, and Jacob Chappell.
Yes, thank you so much.
And everybody who supports the show.
Yeah, yes, thank you to everyone.
And if you can't support the show financially, tell your friends. We had so many good tweets last week. I had to stop retweeting them all because I didn't want to be spammy. A lot of very we appreciate you.
Friendly and flattering tweets out there. Maybe I should start using Twitter again. I don't know.
Look, Red, let's not get crazy here.
I don't know, man.
You know what? I have found the secret to no bummer Twitter.
Yeah.
Well, it's not no bummer. It's mostly no bummer Twitter.
Speaking
you turn
of hedging.
off retweets.
Okay.
And you do that by just going to twitter.com and typing in the mute filters area. Yeah. You do a keyword mute for RT:, and then they go away forever.
I was going to say, I was surprised that they built that functionality in, but it sounds like they don't. They didn't, but you figured it out.
I told a Twitter engineer that you could do this the other day by accident, or an ex-Twitter engineer that you could do this, and I might have fucked us, but I apologize if I did. And then also, if you filter out HTTPS:// you'll get rid of almost all the links. Wow. I think images still come through.
So it's nothing,
but it's nobody promoting bullshit, which I realize is a little bit hypocritical on my part, but whatever.
Don't say that.
Yeah. Because the thing is, people see something that they're like, oh man, this is important, but I don't want to talk about this. It's a huge bummer. Yeah. I'll just smash the retweet button. I've done my job. Yeah. And then it's just, everybody's just retweeting shit that bums them out. So... anyway, Twitter's bad, but the Tech Pod is good. So thank you all for supporting us. We appreciate it.
We are a better Twitter.
Yes. Well, but the thing is, the Discord is the thing. Like, I get out of the Discord now what I used to get out of Twitter when Twitter was good in like 2008. And it was just me goofing with my friends.
And in 2008, I was getting out of Twitter what I previously got out of IRC. So whatever. This is a whole episode topic, but I think the internet is in undertaking a process of wrapping back around to smaller, more enclosed communities again. Perhaps.
Hold on. What did you get out of? Did we replace human contact with IRC in the 90s? Is that what happened?
I mean, that's very presumptuous of you to think that I had human contact in the first place.
Oh, okay.
Look, there were not a lot of people importing weird Japanese PlayStation games in my little podunk rural town.
That's the reason you were the anime editor, I guess, for so long.
I had to go far afield.
Fair.
To find like minds, let's say.
Fair. Okay, well, we'll see you next week. If you have questions, send them into techpod@content.town. We're doing questions next week, so please send us some good ones. And we will see you all next time. Bye, everybody.